1. The date tattooed on Scott's left palm was the day he would die. That was definite. It was the same as the date on his watch. Scott stared out of the window, down at the watcher illuminated by a street lamp. The watcher stared back at him, rain dripping from his hair onto the shoulders of his long grey coat. 14 minutes to midnight. A dog barked, making the watcher squint along the street. Another dog barked in answer. The watcher checked the tracker on his wrist. Scott looked again at his hand. The ink of his tattoo contained the information the watcher was tracking. He poured a large whiskey, then took the framed photograph of Rebecca from the table. In it, her hair blew across her face, her fingers reaching to push it back. He downed the whiskey, then took a wallet from his trouser pocket, opened it, and took out 2 train tickets. Piccadilly Station in Manchester to Oxenholme Station in the Lake District. The edges were damaged, the ink on each one faded, the dates from 2 years before. Outside, the watcher was gone. Scott's throat closed and his chest tightened. A self-driver shushed through the puddles on Sackville Street. He faced the door at the other end of the apartment, rolled his shoulders, grimaced, and cracked his knuckles. 12 minutes to midnight. Maybe this year. No use avoiding it. He never had. To run and hide was pointless. Instead, he stayed home, his light on, informing whoever, or whatever, where he could be found. Not that it mattered. Every centimetre of Manchester was mapped by CCTV and satellite imaging. The light in the hall, edging beneath the door, was momentarily broken by the shadow of someone, or something. Outside, the high-speed train arrived, as always with a whisper to begin with, then its vibrations building until they disturbed the heavy velvet curtains. A spoon rattled inside a bowl next to the sink. The lampshade quivered, and Scott's keys trembled on the table beside him. The smell of fried food from down the hall still lingered. The woman in 33 lived on her own time. Muffled shouts and angry exchanges often came from her apartment. He checked again for the watcher, but the street was empty. Above the rooftops, in the distance, the lights from 2 drones blinked in a regular pattern. 8 minutes to midnight. Another self-driver splashed through the puddles on the street, then a second, coming the opposite way. More shouting from 33, followed by 2 loud thuds. Scott watched the light beneath the door. The rain had been relentless for 2 months. It returned with force against the window, like handfuls of scree dashed against the glass. His skin was clammy, his t-shirt clinging to his shoulders and back, the collar scratching his neck. He pulled at the fabric. As he did so, he heard the sound of a door creaking open, then closed. Again the light beneath the door was broken, then banging against the door. He checked his watch. There was still time. More banging, someone crying. He watched the seconds pass on his watch as the bangs grew louder and louder. 6 minutes.
"Please,"
a woman's voice. More banging.
"I need your help. He's gone up to the roof. I can't stop him."
The train outside had arrived, thundering across the bridge behind the houses and apartment blocks where Sackville Street met Altrincham Street. The woman's voice was drowned out by the train, but he could still hear her fists thudding against the door. So this was how it was going to happen. He edged closer, then swiped across the 2 bolts and pulled the door open. The woman from 33 took Scott's arm and pulled him into the hallway. "Help!" she pleaded. She pointed to his left hand and his date. He had no idea she knew. "Please help! He's on the roof!" The woman yanked Scott into the stairwell before running ahead, up the stairs and out onto the roof, calling him to follow. He looked back into the room and paused, then headed for the stairs. At the far end of the roof stood a young man, right at the edge. To his left was the watcher, who nodded to him. Each year this happened, and each year, for some of the chosen, it came with the same relief. He had at least one more year. The woman pushed Scott towards the young man on the roof. Scott recognized the long, lank hair and the skinny frame. He was tall and thin. He'd seen him many times on the stairs or coming out of his apartment, but they'd never spoken. "He's chosen?" Scott asked the woman. "Is it today?"
It doesn't have to be today, this year. Tell him, please. I know you're chosen too.
The woman's clothes were wet through, her hair matted to her face.
Tell him,
she said. The watcher took a step closer to the young man, and the woman lunged at him, thumping his chest.
Stay away!
Scott walked towards the edge of the roof, and the young man, who held up his hand to show Scott his date, 2304. He'd had no idea the young man was chosen too, but the fleeting, knowing glances he had given him, they made sense now. Scott's watch read a minute after midnight. He walked closer to the edge of the roof. "Jason, isn't it?" he asked. The young man glanced at Scott's hand. "I thought he might be here for you," he said, his eyes flicking to the watcher. "But you have another year." "I know how difficult it is," Scott said. "Getting through the day, knowing it can happen." Jason scoffed, then peered over the edge. Scott paused. "More than difficult." "Mum made us move here, knowing your date was the day before mine. She had this idea that if they came for me, the watchers might take you instead." Scott processed what Jason was saying. It was illogical, but made sense in some desperate way. "I'm done," Jason said. "I can't do it anymore. I was 10 when I found out. Every year, waiting for it to happen. Why don't they tell us the year? At least then—" Scott leaned over the edge. He didn't have an answer to Jason's question. Not an answer that would help, anyway. "You can't," Scott said. "Not like this." Jason wrapped his arms around his chest, holding himself.
"Jason!"
the woman shouted. "Your mum?" Scott asked. "She has no idea what it's like," Jason said, his voice calm, his stare fixed on the road below. "And I'm glad." His mother stood next to the watcher. "No," Scott said. "They have no idea." Jason unfurled his arms and took a deep breath. He was right there, beside him. It would take a moment to reach out and pull him away from the edge of the roof. But Scott didn't move. There was a coldness in the young man's eyes, an expression Scott had seen in the mirror over the past few years. The rain smacked into the puddles on the roof. Scott's chest was cold and still, his feet fixed, his arms motionless. He'd been here before. Except then, he had been waiting for a train at Piccadilly Station, with Rebecca. Watching. Waiting. Jason nodded. Without thinking, Scott nodded too. It was going to happen. Whatever Scott wanted to do or say, he knew it. It was certain. Jason leaned forward and stepped off. In time with the rain, he disappeared over the edge. Above the swell of wind and rain, there was a deep thud. Jason's mother ran to the stairwell, flung open the door, and disappeared, her cries echoing. Scott peered down. Jason was stretched out, half on the pavement, half on the road. The watcher adjusted his collar. "I wish it—" "Don't," Scott said. The watcher edged closer. Jason's mum leapt out of the door below and onto the street. She wailed, falling to her knees on the pavement next to Jason's body. "You chose not to stop him," the watcher said. The woman buried her face in her son's chest and sobbed. "Chose," Scott said. "You saw his date. I know how this works." The watcher cleared his throat. "We are here to watch. That is all," Scott huffed. "That's all? You really expect me to believe that?" The watcher shifted uncomfortably. "Some of them find it difficult to live with." "Difficult? He's just a kid," Scott said. "He is with God now." Scott clenched his fists. "I saw you on the street. You made it look as though you were here for me." The watcher pushed wet hair away from his face, his eyes fixed on the body below. I am here for you.